There were 4 of them in the room, and only 3 were meant to be counted. The Duke of Halborn sat at one end of the long table with a list in front of him. Iris Fenn sat at the other, in a chair placed deliberately far off, being the 11th woman that month to apply for the post of governess at Halborn, and between them, on a low stool by the window in a white pinafore, sat a girl of 9 with her hands folded, watching the light move on the floor. The 4th was the housekeeper, standing by the door with a face like a shut drawer. "You come from Bristol," said the Duke. "Your last place ended in March." "Why?" "The family went abroad, Your Grace. The letter is in the packet before you. Letters may be bought." He did not look up. 2 of the women I saw this month came with letters that would have done credit to an archbishop. One had left her last place, owing 3 tradesmen. The other told me she had a great love of children and then flinched when my niece came near her. He turned a page. "I have found that a person may be described 100 ways on paper and known only by being tried." "I do not object to being tried, Your Grace," said Iris Fenn. "I have been tried by better people than you for smaller wages." Something at the corner of the Duke's mouth moved and did not become anything. The tests at Halborn were known in 3 counties, and every woman who came up that drive came knowing. He was not a cruel man in the ordinary way. He did not shout or beat or refuse to pay. But since his brother and his brother's wife had gone down with the Isabella off Land's End 4 years before, leaving him a niece he did not know what to do with, he had run through 11 governesses and 2 companions and a nurse, and out of that wreckage he had built a system. He tested them. He put a small deliberate difficulty in each candidate's path and watched what she did with it. He had left a purse in a passage and counted it after. He had instructed a footman to be insolent, to see whether she would be insolent back, or complain of it, or bear it. He had sat at this same table and said something calculated to wound, a remark on a woman's plainness, her age, her reduced circumstances, and watched, with a cold curiosity he had stopped examining in himself, to see whether she would weep, or flatter, or lie. They stayed. Every one of them stayed and endured it, because £40 a year is £40 a year, and a woman without a place cannot afford to be proud. And the Duke had come, over 4 years, to take that endurance as the ordinary condition of the world. 11 women that month. 10 sat through it. The 11th was Iris Fenn. He began, as he always did, with a small cruelty. "You are older than I should like," he said. 29 by this. "You have been in service 11 years and risen no further than a country governess at £40, which suggests either that you are not able or that you are not agreeable, and, in my experience, it is generally the second." He set down the paper. "I say this to your face because I dislike waste, Miss Fenn. If you cannot bear plain speaking, you had better tell me now." Iris Fenn did not answer at once. She was looking, he noticed, past him. She was looking at the child. Lucy Halborn, 9 years old, was still on her stool by the window with her hands folded, watching the light. She had not turned when her uncle spoke, and she had not turned when Iris answered, and she did not turn now, and there was in the whole set of her small shoulders the particular stillness of a child who has learnt that a room full of talk is a room that has nothing in it for her. "Your Grace," said Iris, "may I ask a question before I answer yours?" "You may. How long has your niece been deaf?" The room changed temperature. "She is not deaf," said the Duke of Halborn. "She is deaf in the left entirely, and I should think 2/3 gone in the right, and it has been coming on some years by the way she holds her head." Iris had not raised her voice. "I do not say it to be clever. I had a brother the same, and I know the look of a child who reads faces, because she cannot get the words. She is inattentive. She has been examined by 2 physicians in London, who spoke to her from behind, I dare say, and found her slow. Iris's hands were quite still in her lap. Your Grace, I have watched her a quarter of an hour. In that time, you have said her name twice, and she has not turned once, and she has turned 3 times when the door moved, because she felt it in the floor. There is no unwillingness in that child. There is a wall, and everybody on the other side of it has been calling her inattentive for 4 years. The Duke of Halborn sat entirely still. And then, because he was a man who had built a system and could not step outside it, even when it had begun to hurt him, he did the thing that ended the interview. You are very confident, he said, of a household you entered 40 minutes ago. Let us test it then, Lucy. He raised his voice sharply, the way a man does to a servant at a distance. Lucy, come here. The child did not move. Louder, he said to the housekeeper. Tell her, Your Grace, tell her I am displeased. And Iris Fenn stood up. She stood up so plainly that no one understood at first that anything had happened. She did not scrape the chair, or raise her chin, or make a speech. She simply rose and drew on her gloves, and then, deliberately, with both hands, set them down again on the table, side by side, the way a person sets down something they have decided not to carry any further. Miss Fenn, said the Duke, I withdraw my application, Your Grace. Her voice was perfectly level. I thank you for seeing me. I will find my own way out. Sit down. We have not finished. We have finished, Your Grace, and I will tell you exactly where, so that you do not spend the evening wondering. She was already turning. I could have borne what you said about my age and my wages. I have heard it in 6 houses, and I have a stock of answers to it. What I cannot bear is that you have just used a deaf child of 9 as an instrument to test a stranger, in front of the housekeeper, and that when she did not come, you called for it to be said louder that you were displeased. I did not know she was deaf. You did not know, said Iris Fenn, and you have called her inattentive for 4 years. And just now, you had the chance to be wrong in private, and you chose instead to be proved right in front of witnesses, using her. That is the part I will not sit down for. She looked at the child by the window, who had turned at last, feeling the movement in the floor, and who was watching the 2 adults with the flat, unreadable patience of someone who has spent 4 years watching mouths. Good day, Your Grace. I hope you find somebody. I hope, more than that you find somebody before she stops trying to guess what everybody is saying. Because they do stop, and when they stop, it is very hard to get them back. She walked out. Nobody had ever walked out. That sentence went round the servants' hall by supper, and round the parish by Sunday, and it was true. And it was the reason the Duke of Halborn found himself in his own hall 30 seconds later, with no plan whatever, saying, Miss Fenn, stop. She stopped, because a duke had said it, and she turned round, and he saw, not triumphant at all. She was white, and her hands were shaking, and she had put herself out of a place she needed on the strength of a principle. And she knew exactly what that was going to cost her, and she had done it anyway. That was the thing he could not get past afterward. Not the courage. The cost. You have left your gloves, said the Duke of Halborn. I left them on purpose, Your Grace. She did not come back for them. A woman who walks out of a house and then must come back for her gloves has spoiled the whole of it. I have exactly 1 gesture available to me this afternoon, and I would rather it stood. You cannot afford to lose this post. No, she agreed. I cannot. I have £4 and a room in Bristol until the quarter day. You may add that to your list of things you have said to my face today. Her voice did not shake, whatever her hands were doing. I will tell you the rest of it since I have nothing left to lose by it. And then I will go, and you may have the last word if you want it. You have run through 11 governesses in 4 years. Everyone sat through what I would not, and you concluded they had passed, and then each failed you in some particular you could not name. Has it never struck you that a woman who will sit still while a child is used to test her is precisely the woman who will not put herself out for that child later? You have built a machine for selecting people who can be made to endure things. Then you are surprised, every time, that they endure the child too. He did not answer, because there was no answer, and she went, and the door shut, and the Duke of Halborn stood in his own hall with a pair of grey gloves in his hand. He sent the carriage after her before she reached the lodge. Not with an offer. He had wit enough to know an offer would be refused, and pride enough not to have it refused twice in one afternoon. He sent it, with the coachman instructed only to carry Miss Fenn to the Bristol coach at Marlbrook, so that she should not walk the 11 miles, and with a note, "This is not an inducement, and it purchases nothing. You have 11 miles to walk, and I have caused it. H." Iris Fenn read the note at the lodge gate in the rain, and got into the carriage because she was not a fool, and because there was nothing in it to refuse. She was 3 weeks in Bristol with £4, and it was the worst 3 weeks of her adult life, and she did not once regret the gloves. She wrote for 4 places and got none. Word travels. A woman who walks out on a duke is a woman with a temper, and nobody wants a governess with a temper, however much they may privately enjoy the story. And at Halborn, in those same 3 weeks, the Duke did 2 things he would not have believed of himself a month before. He wrote to a man in Edinburgh, whose name he found in a journal, who had written on the education of the deaf, and who answered by return with 4 pages that the Duke read standing up in his own library and had to sit down halfway through. And he sat on the floor of the schoolroom, on the boards, at the level of a 9-year-old's face, and said, slowly, with his mouth where she could see it, "Lucy, can you hear me?" And his niece, who had not been asked a direct question she could see the shape of in 4 years, looked at him with an expression that went through him like a spike, and said, "Some." He came to Bristol in the 4th week. He came himself in a hired chaise, and he found the lodging-house by the simple method of asking at 4 of them, and he stood in a narrow parlour that smelt of other people's dinners with his hat in his hands, and he was, Iris thought, looking at him, a different-shaped man than the one who had sat at the end of the long table. "I have come to offer you the post," he said. "No. Miss Fenn, no, Your Grace. And I am going to say why before you say the rest, because you will make it very difficult for me if you speak first." She stayed standing. "I have £4 less than I had a month ago, and I have been refused in 4 houses because of what I did in yours, and if you offer me £40 a year in this room, at this moment, I will take it, and I will have taken it because I am frightened and hungry, and not because it is right, and I have watched what happens to women who take a post that way. They spend the whole of it grateful. A grateful governess cannot tell a duke he is wrong, and the entire reason you have come is that I told you you were wrong." The Duke of Halborn looked at her for a long moment. "That is exactly the answer," he said slowly, "that a machine built to select endurance could never have found. Then do not offer me a post. What am I to offer you?" "An engagement," said Iris Fenn, "in writing. Not £40 at a duke's pleasure, a term of 1 year at 80. terminable by either of us at 3 months, with the terms of the work set out on the paper, that I shall be permitted to teach her by the methods I judge right, that no person in that house shall speak of her as inattentive or slow in her hearing or out of it, and that I may write to Edinburgh at your expense and follow what I am told." She held his eyes, and one clause more, and it is the one that matters, that I may say to your face that you are wrong, in your own house, without being dismissed for it, and that if you dismiss me for it anyway, the 3 months are paid. You want to be paid for insolence. I want to be paid for honesty, your Grace, because I have learnt this month exactly what honesty costs a woman with £4, and I am not able to afford it twice. Her chin came up. You may call it insolence if it comforts you. You have had 11 governesses who could not afford to contradict you, and a niece who has been called slow for 4 years as a direct consequence. I am proposing that you buy the thing you have never once been sold. He had the paper drawn up by his own solicitor, who objected to every clause and was overruled on all of them. And it was signed in Bristol on the 9th of June, and Iris Fenn came back to Halborn in a hired gig with her own box and her own terms and a copy of the agreement in her pocket. The gloves were on the hall table where she had left them. She picked them up and put them in her pocket beside the paper, and did not say anything about it, and neither did he, and that was the whole of the acknowledgment either of them ever made. What followed was not a romance. For the better part of a year, it was work. The letters came from Edinburgh, and Iris did what they said, and a good deal she worked out herself, and the house learnt a new set of rules that it resented for exactly 1 fortnight, and then adopted entirely. That you did not speak to Lady Lucy from behind, or across a room, or with your hand at your mouth, that you got her eye first and then spoke, that you did not shout, because shouting distorts a mouth and helps nobody, that when she did not follow, you said it again in different words and not the same words, louder, and a set of signs, out of the Edinburgh letters and out of what the two of them invented between them, grew up in that schoolroom like a language, because it was one. By September, Lucy had 1,100 words she could read on a face, and perhaps 40 she could make with her hands, and she was, it turned out, not slow at all. She was quick. She had been quick the whole time, in the dark, alone, guessing for 4 years. The Duke of Halborn learnt the signs too. That was the thing Iris had not expected, and never quite got over, that a man of that rank sat in a schoolroom in the evenings, being corrected on his hand shapes by a 9-year-old, and by a governess who was paid to tell him he was wrong, and that he came back the next evening and the next. He was clumsy at it for months. He kept at it anyway. In November, his niece laughed at him for the first time in 4 years, at a sign he made badly, and the Duke of Halborn came out of that schoolroom and stood in the passage for some minutes before he could go down to dinner. The trouble came in January, and it came from his own family, and it came dressed as concern. Lady Sybil Marchwood was the Duke's aunt, and the nearest thing Lucy had to a female relation on the mother's side, and she had been perfectly content for 4 years to leave the child in Wiltshire with a succession of governesses, and to visit twice a year. What she was not content with, arriving in January, was what she found. She found a duke on the schoolroom floor making shapes with his hands, and a governess of 29 on £80 a year, and a written agreement, contradicting him at his own table about drainage, and a household, referring to Lady Lucy Halburn, granddaughter of an earl, in terms of what she could and could not hear, out loud, as a plain fact. And she found, inquiring in 2 drawing rooms, that the whole county had a story about how the governess had come, that she had walked out on the Duke, and he had chased her into the hall, and gone to Bristol after her, and brought her back on her own terms. Lady Sybil put those things together and arrived at the only conclusion available to a woman of her generation, that her nephew had installed his mistress in the schoolroom, and that the deaf business was a fiction got up between them to explain it. She moved in February. She wrote to the Court of Chancery. The petition was for the removal of the Duke of Halborn as guardian of his niece, on the grounds that the child's education had been given over to an unqualified woman of no character, following an irregular attachment, and that the child was being taught to communicate by gestures like a savage instead of by speech, to the certain ruin of her prospects. It was, Iris thought, reading the copy with hands that would not keep still, extremely well built. Every fact in it was true. She had walked out. He had followed. He had gone to Bristol. The agreement was irregular. She was unqualified in any sense a court would recognize, and the signs were, indisputably, gestures. "They will take her," said the Duke. He had gone the colour of paper. "Chancery decides badly, and it will take a year. And at the end of it they will put her with Sybil. And Sybil will have the signs beaten out of her because she believes it is kindness." "Stop." Iris put her hand flat on the table. "Sit down. You are running all the way to the end and then being ill about it. We are at the beginning, and the first thing is to understand what they are actually attacking. They are attacking you. They are attacking you through me, which is not the same, and it matters." She turned the petition round. "Look, every allegation about me is an allegation about your judgment. You appointed her, you followed her, you signed this extraordinary paper. I am the instrument, Your Grace. Lady Sybil does not care what I am. She has thought since the Isabella went down that a bachelor uncle is no fit guardian for a girl, and she has waited 4 years for a stick, and I am the stick. Then I will remove the stick," said the Duke. "I will dismiss you and pay the 3 months, and she will have nothing to strike with." "Do that," said Iris Fenn, "and you have told the Court of Chancery that the allegation was true. He asked her to marry him that night, and it was the worst thing he could have done, and she told him so. It would answer everything, he said. It ends the irregularity in a morning. There is no version of Sybil's petition that survives you being my wife, and there is no version of me that survives it either." Iris was on her feet. Think for 1 minute past the relief. If I marry you in February, with that petition on the table, then every word Lady Sybil wrote becomes the accepted history of this house forever. That there was an attachment, that the schoolroom was a pretense, that a governess got a duke. Lucy will grow up hearing it. She will hear it at her presentation, and she will hear it when she marries. And she will hear it, Your Grace, in whatever way she can hear anything, for the whole of her life. Her voice cracked for the first time in 9 months, and you and I would know it was not true, and we would be the only 2 people in England who did, and I will not buy my own safety with her name. The Duke of Halborn sat down slowly. "Then what?" "Then we do the thing that is actually hard," said Iris, "which is that we go into that court, and we do not marry, and we win it on the child." The hearing was at Salisbury in April, before a master in Chancery, and it lasted 2 days, and the county packed the room. Lady Sybil's counsel was good. He put the irregular agreement in evidence, and read the clause about contradiction aloud in a tone that got a laugh. He put the county gossip in, delicately. He put Iris in the box and asked her, with great courtesy, whether she had walked out of the Duke's house the previous April, whether the Duke had followed her into the hall, and whether he had gone to Bristol after her, and she said yes, 3 times, because they were all true. And she watched the room draw the conclusion. And then her own counsel, paid for by the Duke and instructed by Iris, which the solicitor had also objected to, asked her one question. "Miss Fenn, why did you walk out?" And Iris Fenn told the Court of Chancery in a plain voice about a girl of 9 years old on a stool by a window, and a man at the end of a long table who had said louder, "Tell her I am displeased," and about what she had said before she left, and about the fact that she had left with £4 and no place, and had been refused in 4 houses for it. "I did not walk out because I was insulted, sir. I have been insulted for 11 years, and I have a stock of answers. I walked out because that child was being used as an instrument in a room where nobody had troubled to find out she was deaf. And I will say the rest of it, since I am on oath. I was not brave. I was 30 seconds from sitting down. Anybody in this room who has ever had £4 and no place knows exactly what I mean. The Duke of Halborn went into the box on the second day and did the thing his counsel had begged him not to do. "I am asked whether I have shown poor judgment," he said. "I have. I want it on the record, in my own words, because my aunt's petition has not the half of it. For 4 years I ran that house on a system. I tested every woman who came into it. With planted money, with insolent servants, with cruelties I said at my own table to see what a woman would do with them. 11 governesses sat through it. I took their sitting through it as proof of character. And in April of last year, I used my own niece as the instrument of one of those tests, in front of a stranger and my own housekeeper, and called for it to be said louder that I was displeased at a child who could not hear me and whom I had called inattentive for 4 years. He did not look at his aunt. One person in 11 stood up and walked out of that room. She did it with £4 in the world and no place to go, and she left her gloves behind so she could not be made to come back for them. My aunt's petition says my judgment gave my niece into the hands of an unqualified woman. My judgment did nothing of the sort. My judgment produced 11 qualified women who let me go on believing that child was slow. It was Miss Fenn's judgment that found her in a quarter of an hour from across a room, and Miss Fenn's judgment I have been buying at £80 a year ever since. And the clause my aunt's counsel read out to make the room laugh, the one that says she may tell me I am wrong and be paid if I dismiss her for it, is the single best decision I have made in 9 years as Duke of Halborn. And I will say one thing more, and then I am done. I asked Miss Fenn to marry me in February, when this petition arrived, because it would have ended the whole business in a morning. She refused me. She refused me on the ground that a marriage made under that petition would make every word of it true forever in my niece's hearing, and that she would not buy her own safety with the child's name. That is the woman my aunt has described to this court as being of no character. I have nothing further, sir, except to say that I did not deserve to be walked out on, and I have been trying for a year to become a man who would deserve to be walked back in on. They put Lucy Halborn in the room on the second afternoon, which Lady Sybil's counsel had asked for, and instantly regretted. She was 10 by then. She stood where she could see the master's face, and she was asked questions slowly, and she answered them, some in speech which was thick and effortful and entirely comprehensible, and some in signs which Iris rendered, and which the master permitted after an argument. She was asked whether she was happy. She said yes. She was asked whether she wished to live with her great-aunt in London. She said no, and then, being 10, added a reason nobody had prompted, that Aunt Sybil talked with her hand in front of her mouth, and got cross when Lucy did not know, and that her uncle was still bad at the signs but did them every night. The master in Chancery, who had 4 grandchildren, wrote something down and did not look up. The petition was dismissed in May. The master's ruling observed, in the dry language of the court, that the arrangements at Halborn appeared to be producing a child who could communicate her own wishes clearly to the court, which was more than could be said for several arrangements he had approved that year. Lady Sybil went back to London and did not write for 2 years, and then did, and was answered, and came at Christmas eventually, and learnt in her 70s perhaps 30 signs. Badly. Iris always said it was not nothing. And the Duke of Halborn waited. He waited 11 months from the dismissal of the petition. A year and more of the same schoolroom, and the same evenings, and the same corrections. And no word of February, because he had understood at last that the asking was itself a thing that could be done well or badly, and that he had done it badly once, and did not intend to again. He asked her in April, 2 years to the month from the afternoon she had walked out, in the hall where he had said stop. "There is no petition," he said. "There is no advantage in it to either of us, and nothing it would settle, and nobody it would silence, and you have had a year and 11 months to leave at 3 months' notice, and have not. I am asking because I want to, and for no other reason at all. And if you say no, I will have the agreement renewed for another year in the morning. And never mention it again, and I want you to believe that, because it is the only way the question is worth asking." Iris Fenn took a pair of grey gloves out of her pocket, the same ones kept there for 2 years, worn soft, and set them down on the hall table, side by side, the way a person sets down something they have decided not to carry any further. "I set these down here once to make a point I could not afford to make," she said. "I would like to set them down now for the other reason, which is that I am not going anywhere, Your Grace, and have not been for some time, and it took me 11 months to be sure it was not gratitude." She looked up at him. "Yes, and the clause stays in. Marriage does not repeal it. I will go on telling you when you are wrong, and you will go on being paid for it in the only coin that matters, which is that this time somebody in your house will say the true thing out loud while there is still time to do something about it. There is a small day school in the village at Halborn, endowed by the Duke, and run, in all the particulars that signify, by the Duchess. It takes 11 children at a time. 4 of them are deaf, and the rest are not, and they all learn the signs together, which was Lucy's idea at 14, and which the Edinburgh correspondent called the most sensible thing he had heard in 30 years. Lucy grew up. She was not cured, because there was nothing to cure. She was educated, which is a different word. And she read 4 languages, and she married, at 24, a mathematician from Aberdeen who had corresponded with her for 2 years before he ever saw her face, and had learnt her signs on paper out of pure stubbornness before he came south. And on a hall table at Halborn, under a glass, there is a pair of grey gloves that no one is permitted to move. Visitors ask, and the family gives different answers depending on who is telling it. The Duke's version was that they were the price of the best year's work anybody ever did for him. Lucy's version, which she signed as often as she spoke it, was that they were the reason anybody ever asked her a question she could see. The Duchess gave hers only once, to a young woman who came up the drive years later to be interviewed for a post, and was nervous and asked in the hall what the gloves meant. "They mean," said Iris, "that this house used to test people, and that the test was the wrong way round, and that the only person who ever passed it was the one who refused to sit through it. You are not going to be tested this afternoon, my dear. You are going to be asked what you can do, and told the truth in return." She put her hand on the young woman's arm and turned her toward the schoolroom door. "Come and meet the children." and do not speak to them from behind. They will not be able to see you, and it is the only rule in this house that has never once been broken.